Earlier this year, Donald Trump was elected president. Do you remember everything that's happened so far? I remember by the end of his first term, Trump's 4 years as president had largely become a blur for many people. While it was happening, it felt like it was non-stop Trump news, but then after it was over, people were like, wait, what even just happened? It's become popular to talk about the media strategy of flooding the zone, a phrase which I believe was popularized after a leaked recording of Steve Bannon using it while talking political strategy with somebody. The concept is they just keep doing things. It's just one thing after the next, creating as many stories and headlines as possible. Every day you wake up and there's some new bullshit, and you eventually just get overwhelmed and start losing interest. You get sick of hearing about it all, you can't keep track. And the next time an election comes around, all that shit they did isn't really on people's mind anymore when they decide how to vote. This is why I've been trying to clearly timeline the events of his presidency while keeping it down to only the consequential stuff, because there's been a lot of bullshit stories that we spend our time and energy on, but that don't really amount to anything in terms of government action or policy. I thought the Elon Musk Nazi salute was a good example of this. We talked about it for days, people wrote articles about it, people debated about whether it was really a Nazi salute, but really in the big picture, who cares? It's not like this accomplished anything or changed anything. And right now, as I'm in the process of making this video, there are people in the media talking about an advertisement that a clothing company ran to promote their denim trousers. Even if there was a problem with this ad, who cares? If we were in normal times and the US had a normal government, some of this stuff might be newsworthy just because we have time to kill and there's nothing more important to talk about. But this presidency is a fucking emergency room and we need to triage this shit. The remainder of this video is going to be news about the Trump administration from the inauguration day on January 20th to, let's just say July 4th, America Day, because I need some kind of arbitrary cutoff. Remember, Trump said that if you elect him, he'll end the Russia-Ukraine war on day one, he'll get the hostages back from Hamas, he'll end inflation, he'll lower your grocery prices. And of course he's done none of this, nor does he know how to do any of these things. He just says shit. The other thing to note is that before getting elected, Trump and his family started a huge crypto scam called Trump Coin, and his family started a whole crypto company called World Liberty Financial that solicits investment while bragging about its connections to the president. Trump's 2 sons run the company with somebody named Zach Witkoff, whose father, Steve Witkoff, Trump named to be his special envoy to the Middle East. So now this dude, who has no real qualifications for this type of work, and who has direct financial ties to Donald Trump and his family, is going around the world as an official ambassador of the United States, making deals with people in other countries. Gee, I wonder if he's up to something. You might not fully understand all of this crypto stuff. It's kind of like how you can buy stock in a company, and if more people want to buy stock in a company, then the company's stock price goes up. But there is no actual business that sells anything, you're just buying shares in a non-existent concept. And also you can do so from anywhere in the world completely anonymously. So this is a really great tool if you want to, bribe Donald Trump and co. Donald Trump is going to make billions of dollars from this. I'm not exaggerating. This is going to be the most that anybody has ever personally enriched themselves from the presidency before, and nothing about this is very well hidden. Okay, January 20th, day 1. Trump withdraws the US from the World Health Organization and the Paris Climate Agreement. These are both pretty bad changes, but Trump doesn't care about climate change. He used to just say it's a hoax made up by China. And he's appeasing the right-wing conspiracy people who think that COVID was like a bioweapon created by China, so I guess they're both made up by China. This first day in office was also when Trump signed an executive order to eliminate birthright citizenship in the US. How can he just do that? Well, he's not supposed to be able to. It's part of the constitution of the country. But somebody brought him a piece of paper that basically said if your parents are illegal, then you don't get citizenship even if you're born here, and he signed it. Now, even if you don't think birthright citizenship is a good idea, this is definitely not the right or the lawful way to make such a change, basically just at the whim of the president. Trump then issued hundreds of pardons, over 1,000, to all the people, every single person who was involved in his own attempt at stealing the 2020 election, where he lost the election, but then he and his team had these people show up and lie to the government by pretending to be the electors from states that he didn't win, and then he tried to pressure his Vice President Pence to pretend as though he had the authority to ignore the actual election results and just go with these random people that Trump had pretend to be the real electors. And part of how he tried to pressure everybody into accepting this was by summoning a huge crowd of people to the Capitol and whipping them into a frenzy to intimidate lawmakers. A lot of those people broke into the building and ended up getting federal charges. There were also numerous right-wing militia groups involved, the most well-known one being the Proud Boys, but there were others, who were knowingly planning to help overthrow the election results. The leaders of these groups were charged with seditious conspiracy. One of them was sentenced to jail for 22 years. And then, Trump just came in and pardoned all of these people, so they all got away with it. And also on day one, Trump signed his executive order basically saying that trans women are men and trans men are women. He says the government shall recognize only birth sex, there is no such thing as gender, and that all sex-based facilities in the federal government will use sex only. Any trans women in federal women's prisons are ordered to be moved to men's prisons, and trans women across the country who had the gender marker on their ID changed to reflect their gender start having that change forcibly reversed. That all happened on day one, and that's not everything he did on day one, that's just me choosing the most important things. By the way, what's an executive order? I've seen a lot of confusion about this term online. An executive order, or an EO, isn't a new law. It's the president telling the government, which he's the head of, what to do. It's like if a company got a new boss, and that new boss sent out a memo to all of his employees. But when the government does it, it's public, so that the public can see it and know what to expect, because the employees of the federal government all have to do what he says. So when you read these executive orders, you have to understand them as Trump telling members of the federal government, the executive branch, what to do. That's the actual structure of these things. January 24th. Pete Hegseth is confirmed as U.S. Defense Secretary. This guy is not qualified. He's a Fox News host. He does not belong at a position like this.
I don't think I've washed my hands for 10 years. Really, I don't really wash my hands ever.
Help me!
It just goes to show the main criteria Trump is selecting for in his cabinet is loyalty and sucking up to him, because there's no other reason that this dude would become the defense secretary. And yet this is probably one of his better appointments. January 28th. Trump signs an executive order attempting to ban all gender-affirming care for trans people, which is not going to happen because an EO can't do that, but he also orders all federal agency to purge any department materials based on the WPATH standards of care, which, on the other hand, an EO can do, so that did happen. January 29. There was a big story on this day about a plane and a helicopter running into each other at an airport in Arlington, Virginia. Trump just went in front of reporters and said this was all DEI's fault somehow, because, I don't know, people died, so here, have some racism.
The FAA's diversity push includes focus on hiring people with severe intellectual and psychiatric disabilities. And then it says FAA says people with severe disabilities are most underrepresented segment of the workforce, and they want them in, and they can be air traffic controllers. I don't think so. They put a big push to put diversity into the FAA's program.
If anything, the actual reason was probably the air traffic controller department, or whatever it's called, being understaffed, which it was. January 31st. A lot of research data that was previously being hosted on US government websites is currently being deleted for no reason. They're just purging databases. The US government collects a lot of really valuable information, but now on Trump's order, everything is just being sabotaged. February 1st. This is when Trump started talking about imposing tariffs onto everything. This didn't end up being imposed because he instead did this back and forth, delay, announce, maybe, maybe not, make himself the center of attention for a while everybody tries to figure out what's going on. February 2nd. Elon Musk and his aides, who all seem to be 19-year-old boys for some reason. I don't know if Musk is on that ancient Greek elder shit or something, but they're now all empowered by Trump's blessing as this pseudo-government agency thing, and they're going around taking over computer systems at actual government agencies, locking out the actual civil servants who are supposed to be there. I feel like after Elon Musk left government, people just kind of stopped thinking about this shit, but we don't know what happened to all this data that he gained access to, or what he might be doing with it. This is still really fucking weird in hindsight. February 4th. Marco Rubio announces that El Salvador is going to house illegal U.S. immigrants who are being deported, regardless of their nationality, regardless of if they're actually from El Salvador. They're just going to be sent to CCOT, this new mega prison that El Salvador built in 2022. El Salvador's president is going kind of wild himself, and he's glad to offer up his country's prisons for pay. The relevant concept here is called extraordinary rendition. This is when you move somebody out of your country into some other country so that you can fuck them up without having to follow your own country's laws. This prison, CCOT, would not be legal if it were in the US. It's inhumane. It's basically just a hole to die in. And then Rubio mentions that it could include US citizens someday, signaling that, yeah, this isn't only for the illegals. We're just starting with them. And yeah, the point is that El Salvador would get paid for this, so the administration is hiring another country to help circumvent US law. That same day, in a joint presser with Netanyahu, Trump proclaimed that the US is going to take over the Gaza Strip, and that Palestinians there can just leave permanently. Trump says he sees a long-term ownership position in Cold Gaza valuable real estate. Is this actually going to happen? I'm not sure how much really came from this one. Oh, and then Trump withdrew the U.S. from the UN Human Rights Council, and he cut funding to UNRWA, which is the UN org that focuses on helping Palestinian refugees. And this is when Pam Bondi was sworn in as Attorney General, meaning the head of the Justice Department. She was Trump's defense lawyer during his first impeachment thingy, and unlike Trump's other cabinet picks, she actually has relevant experience that would qualify her for the position under normal circumstances. She was the state Attorney General of Florida for 10 years. But she's basically just being given the job because she'll be obedient to Trump and help him do crimes and serve as his attack dog against anyone he doesn't like. So, I mean, you get what you get with this administration. Just because she has the job experience doesn't mean that she's remotely principled. Remember, the main thing that Trump was dissatisfied about with the people that he had in his first administration was precisely that they were all too principled, meaning when Trump came to them and told them to do crazy shit, they said no. This time around, he's just trying to find people who will never say no to him. February 5th, Trump signed an EO attempting to ban all trans athletes from women's sports. I don't think the federal government can actually do that, but he's just said we're going to cut any federal funding toward a sports organization that allows trans women to compete. This is estimated to affect fewer than 10 people. February 11th, Trump demands $500 billion worth of rare earth minerals from Ukraine in exchange for continued support. This was also the first time the AP was blocked from attending an event as punishment for not updating the Gulf of Mexico's name in their global articles. February 12th, Tulsi Gabbard is sworn in as Director of National Intelligence, meaning the CIA, the NSA, and other organizations. I think there's 18 different agencies that this position oversees. A bunch of them we've probably never heard of, but she's in charge of it all now. This was a terrible person for the job. A list of people who would have been less trustworthy for such a position would not be a very long list. February 13th. The very next day, RFK Jr., the unqualified anti-vaccine conspiracy theorist retard who's literally missing a piece of his brain because it was eaten by worms, was confirmed as Secretary of Health and Human Services. He's probably going to implement a bunch of dumb bullshit that makes no sense, and a lot of people are going to die needlessly as a result, but this is the Trump administration we're talking about, so who cares? They'll just let him do it. February 14th. This was the day the Eric Adams case blew up. Eric Adams was the mayor of New York City, then he did a bunch of corrupt stuff, he took bribes, he stole money from the city, he's an idiot, he got caught, he was up shit creek. Then he met with Trump, and Trump instructed the DOJ to drop all charges against him, but without prejudice, which is lawyer talk to mean we can bring this up again in the future if we want. So the Trump administration used the threat of prosecution for crimes that he committed in order to arrange a quid pro quo where he gets lenience in exchange for agreeing to cooperate more with Trump's deportation agenda in New York City. And no, you don't even need to speculate, as reasonable as it would have been to do so, that this was the rationale for the decision. They literally issued a memo where they spelled out that part of the reason for the dismissal was that it allowed Adams to help support federal immigration initiatives. I think the Trump theory of government at this point is that if you do all your crime and corruption out in the open, and then just get up and yell, "Hey everyone, look at me, I'm breaking the law," then it just somehow doesn't count because it's not secretive. They needed somebody to actually sign the papers dismissing the charges, and a lot of people at the DOJ refused, which led to a bunch of resignations. Daniel Sassoon and Hagen Skodden, attorneys for the Southern District of New York, which, in case you're not familiar, is a federal body, despite the name kind of sounding like a state-level agency in New York. The court system is split up into districts, and one of the federal districts is called the Southern District of New York. These two people both published scathing letters alongside their resignations, where they spell out how bullshit this whole situation is.
Any assistant U.S. attorney would know that our laws and traditions do not allow using the prosecutorial power to influence other citizens, much less of elected officials, in this way. If no lawyer within earshot of the president is willing to give him that advice, then I expect you will eventually find someone who is enough of a fool or enough of a coward to file your motion. But it was never going to be me. Wow. Please consider this my resignation.
This one story would have been enough to completely destroy a president's whole career decades ago, whereas this year I feel like most people have already forgot that this even happened. Also, Trump fired the entire nuclear staff at this thing called the NNSA, then realized, oopsie, we actually needed all of those people, so then he rehired all of them 24 hours later. Very competent. The best. Also, he signed an order to stop federal funding from going to schools that voluntarily had been choosing to require their students to be vaccinated. All the vaccine-related shit is just so fucking stupid. It's like he has a bunch of scammers and schizos whispering in his ear. February 19th. In foreign policy news, this was the day Trump called Zelensky a dictator for some reason. Then Vladimir Putin, at his meeting in Saudi Arabia, praised the Trump administration and said that the Trump team had no criticism of him, and then Trump claimed that Ukraine started the war. This is the type of story where I would normally consider it a non-story and not even bother including it because nothing really happened, it was just words. But these were some particularly influential statements. The fucking lie that Zelensky is a dictator and the obfuscation about what a dictator even is accompanies and aids all of the other disinformation about this war, and this is the kind of thing that changes people's attitudes over time, making them more likely to oppose helping Ukraine. February 20th, 1 month in. Kash Patel is confirmed as FBI director. This guy is fucking crazy. The one and only thing that I appreciate about him is that he looks the part. He looks fucking crazy. Some of the other people in the Trump administration are crazy, but they just kinda look normal and boring. This guy looks like somebody who you'd cast in a movie to play a crazy dude. But I swear he's even crazier than he fucking looks. Like, QAnon fantasy world kind of bullshit. Like, he pushes all the deranged conspiracy theories, and now he's in charge of the FBI. And kind of like Hegseth, he's just generally not that qualified for his position. He was ultimately just given the position because he's a Trump sycophant. And he's not very secretive about that. We can just look at the books he's published. Isn't it wonderful how in fiction the crazy extremist guy who wants to ruin everything, they're all secretive and plotting, whereas then in reality these people are all proud about how fucking crazy they are? The Plot Against the King is a children's book about Trump, and it's all about the evil deep state led by Hillary Clinton inventing the Russia hoax to take Trump down. You remember the Russia hoax? And in case you don't remember, it wasn't a hoax at all. It was a connection based on actual evidence that was investigated, not even fully investigated because Trump was illegally obstructing the investigation for much of it, but that still led to indictments and jail time for Trump's close associates and members of his campaign who knowingly and multiple times met and coordinated with Russian agents and hackers. But now everybody in Trump world just pretends like none of this happens and just calls it a hoax and acts like nothing was found, even though it was all fucking true and it was proved true that his campaign was in fact working with Russians. Yeah, okay. So this guy wrote a book, a children's book, because remember, they are coming for your children, quote-unquote retelling this completely made-up version of events that totally vindicates Trump in this sickeningly child-friendly format. Patel also wrote Government Gangsters, The Deep State, the Truth, and the Battle of Our Democracy, in which he, while pretending to give a shit about democracy, pushes a bunch of completely baseless lies that he made up about the FBI doing crimes to help fuck over Trump in 2016, which is funny, considering the FBI, in reality, is a huge reason why Trump won in 2016, because they actually fucked over Hillary Clinton. But okay, I guess they're just hoping nobody remembers any of that. He also had a list of key people working in government that he considered to be the deep state, which is why you might remember that around the time of his confirmation, people were talking about him having an enemies list. March 3rd. Linda McMahon. Oh, it's pronounced McMahon. Oh, it's the wife of the wrestling guy. Okay. Well, apparently now she's also head of the education department. And she's a completely unqualified fucking idiot, but okay. What do you expect from these appointments? March 6. Around this time, a bunch of tariffs have come into effect, and Trump is granting exemptions. This is part of the fascist demo where you try to control private industry by exerting leverage over everybody using the power of the state. In this case, yeah, we're going to tax the shit out of everything, and if you want an exemption, you have to come crawling to Trump and then do whatever he asks in exchange. In the first Trump admin, a lot of companies didn't seem to get along with him. They treated him like a temporary aberration that they were just waiting to blow over, but now they've realized this is just how things are now. And this is probably the main reason that Trump is actually going through with all of these tariffs. It forces these companies to come groveling to him and then play nice in exchange for favors, making him the center of attention and giving him an incredible amount of power over people, some of whom he personally doesn't like because they were against him in the past. Oh, and this was also the day that Trump started targeting law firms. The first one was called Perkins Coie LLP, because they worked with Hillary Clinton and other Democratic Party-aligned people in the past. He signed an order that would revoke their ability to work with anybody connected to the federal government, and to limit their access to federal buildings, which is a pretty big deal for a law firm. March 7th. We learn that Trump is challenging the legitimacy of the US-Canada border. He apparently told Trudeau that he wanted to revisit agreements about sharing of lakes and rivers between the two countries. Trump was asked whether he would use military force to annex land from Canada, and he said no, he would do it with economic force. This hasn't materialized yet, but Trudeau privately said that he doesn't consider this a joke, and that after meeting with Trump, he does believe that Trump wants to annex not the entirety of Canada, but parts of it. He could take land from Canada. He wants to be known as a president who expanded the US territory, and he is taking concrete actions to try and weaken the Canadian economy for that purpose, while justifying it with some lies about fentanyl coming through the border or whatever. March 9th. This is when federal immigration authorities arrested Mahmoud Khalil, an activist who was doing pro-Palestinian stuff, and who played a role in some protest against Israel or something. He was not an illegal immigrant, he was a legal permanent resident. They just revoked his status and green card. He didn't get deported, but he did get arrested and detained for a while for basically no reason. Trump bought a Tesla and did a Tesla ad in front of the White House. Why? There's so much bad shit happening that stuff like this doesn't even register for us anymore, but this is one of those things that, this would have never happened before. I'm pretty sure it's actually illegal, but it's also just unclassy. It's so stupid. Why do you want your head of state literally doing ads? Then all the reporters went inside, and Trump's press secretary told the AP, tariffs are a tax cut.
Curious
he's not
for
doing
why
that.
he's prioritizing that over the tax cuts.
He's actually not implementing tax hikes. Tariffs are a tax hike on foreign countries that, again, have been ripping us off. Tariffs are a tax cut for the American people.
They're literally a tax. That's what a tariff is. A tariff is a tax on imports. I have no idea how they're just so blatantly and shamelessly lying about everything. I almost didn't even bother including this, because if I had to include every time one of these people told a lie, it would just be a huge list of almost everything they say. But this one in particular is so comically backwards that it kind of stood out to me. She may as well look dead in the camera and say it's actually darker at night than during the day. This woman has completely sold her soul. Also, the Department of Education, which Trump wants to abolish, though he doesn't have the power to do so, just fired half of its workers. March 14th. In the 1790s, there was an act called the Alien Enemies Act, which gave the president extra leeway to expel foreign nationals of a country that America is at war with. Trump invokes this act, claiming it justifies expedited deportation of Venezuelans. This is unlawful. That's not how the act works. He doesn't have the power to do this. The U.S. is not at war with Venezuela. The president doesn't have the authority to declare war. Nothing about this makes any sense. But they immediately deported hundreds of people based on this justification. And they waited till Friday night to do it, to add as much delay as possible before the courts were able to respond, because they knew that what they were doing was fucked up and was going to cause a bunch of legal problems. The people being deported were given no due process. They were basically just rounded up on suspicion, thrown onto a plane, and then funneled into the illegal CCOT mega prison thing. Then the administration just shrugged and said, well, they were all gangsters. And we know they were gangsters because they had tattoos, which led to a bunch of press about how these were actually just random tattoos. Some of them were soccer related, but the administration just lied and said, oh yeah, no, these are all gang tattoos. Now, worth mentioning here is that legally speaking, it's not that hard to deport somebody from the country if you can show they're not here legally, because deportation is not legally considered a punishment like sending them to prison. You're not taking away their fundamental rights, you're not giving them a criminal record, you're just sending them back to the country they're from. It's like removing somebody from your home, or a bar owner removing you from their bar. They don't have to take you to court over it and prove that you're guilty of something. They can just say, this is my bar, so get out. And the problem is that that logic stops working when you're now effectively deporting people into a prison. So it is a punishment. They're not being taken back to their home country and set free. They're being taken to El Salvador and thrown into CCOT. They're effectively declaring these people guilty and sentencing them to prison, but in another country that doesn't have our legal protections, and also they don't get a trial. They're just being thrown in prison. It's like the whole thing with Guantanamo Bay. They're exploiting an out-of-country location to persecute people and circumvent U.S. law. This was also the day Trump issued an order targeting another law firm, Paul Weiss, Rickfund, Wharton, and Garrison. Why are law firms named like this? Everybody just shortens it to the first two names, Paul Weiss. Here again, Trump is punishing a law firm for working with the Democratic Party, and he cites the issue that the law firm has DEI policies. He threatens to end all contracts between them and anybody connected to government, to revoke security clearance of any Paul Weiss employees. So basically, this is just more do what I say or else mafia boss style politicking, trying to create a chilling effect, trying to bend the legal system to his favor. This was also the day that Trump said CNN and MSNBC are political arms of the Democratic Party and that what they're doing is illegal.
CNN and MSDNC, who literally write 97.6% bad about me, are political arms of the Democrat Party. And in my opinion, they're really corrupt and they're illegal. What they do is illegal. It's very sad what they do to the Supreme Court. And a lot of the judges that I had, if you look at them, they take tremendous abuse in the New York Times and the Washington Post, all of the different networks. They take such abuse. And honestly, they're very simply, they're afraid of bad publicity. They don't want bad publicity. And it's truly interference, in my opinion, and it should be illegal, and it probably is illegal in some form.
It's all part of laying the groundwork for suppressing political speech in the future. He says it's really no different than a highly paid political operative. It has to stop. It has to be illegal. This is really fucking ironic when you consider the dick suck fest media that worships him and does his propaganda for him. I guess it's literally just projection. March 17th, Trump announces that he's trying to annul Biden's pardons. This is the beginning of the autopen fixation/conspiracy theory, which has become a theme of Trump world in the preceding months, and is probably something they're never going to shut up about. I mean, they're still complaining about Obama and Hillary Clinton, so... He also issued a memo instructing the DOJ to continue seeking action against any law firms or lawyers that oppose him. March 18th. This is when Trump started attacking James Boasberg. This is a federal judge who was presiding over the case about his use of the Alien Enemies Act. Trump called him a radical left lunatic who should be impeached for some reason. This is how we got that one story about the Supreme Court Justice Roberts making a public statement about how disagreeing with a ruling isn't grounds to remove a judge, and everybody acted like this was Roberts, like standing up to Trump. Trump also says he has a very good, productive, awesome, perfect fucking phone call with Putin. Wow, progress on the Russia-Ukraine front? But no, actually Putin just made new demands, didn't agree to shit, and rejected calls for a ceasefire. I don't know what the fuck Trump was talking about. March 20th, Trump signs an order to close the Department of Education. Again, he doesn't really have the authority to do that. It's a department created by Congress, but he tries to close it as much as possible without technically closing it. Like if you fired every single employee except for one person. He's effectively just gutting its resources and trying to make it incapable of actually doing anything. Now, why does the Department of Education matter? Well, they help fund schools across the country. It's the agency that does financial aid for post-secondary school, if you want a college loan. But why is the Trump admin against this department? The meme answer is that the Republican Party wants everybody to be stupid, but there's also a right-wing movement in the US to defederalize education as much as possible so that Republican-controlled states can go crazy when it comes to education curriculum. This is similar to how a lot of right-wing people are really into homeschooling. It's all about trying to socially isolate your own children so that you can exert more control over their beliefs. And then also try to prevent them from ever making friends with a black person. March 24th. This was the Signal scandal. Signal Gate, as some people called it. Hegseth, J.D. Vance, Waltz, Ratcliffe, Gabbard. A bunch of these people were using a private app called Signal to communicate official state business. This is illegal, they're not archiving things properly, it's a huge security risk. And then, oh look, one of them was so fucking dumb, they added a random journalist to the group and nobody noticed. That journalist was the editor of The Atlantic. Gabbard testified saying no classified material was shared, so The Atlantic just published the whole thing. If this happened under Obama or Bush or Clinton or, well, I guess you can't go back really far because the Signal type apps didn't exist back then, but if you try to imagine like their technology's equivalent of having a total disregard for security, this is way worse than the entire Hillary Clinton email scandal that ruined her campaign in 2016. These people are all fucking incompetent and should have resigned in shame. Instead, literally nothing happened, they all got away with it. It's fucking crazy. March 27th. We now see that legal permanent residents, not illegal immigrants, but people who have green cards, can just randomly be arrested for basically no reason and shipped out of the country overnight into a CCOT mega prison in El Salvador with no due process, no ability to talk to a lawyer, no right to habeas corpus. Judges across the country are reacting in confusion and amazement because this whole operation is so appalling. As one judge named Patricia Millett observes, There's no regulations, nothing was adopted by the agency officials that were administering this. They weren't given notice, they weren't told where they were going, they had no right to file habeas or any other type of action to challenge the removal under the AEA. There were plane loads of people, there were no procedures in place to notify people. Nazis got better treatment. March 31st. There's a state-level Supreme Court race happening in Wisconsin. Elon Musk shows up and repeats some of the same illegal tactics that he used during the 2024 presidential election. He shows up in Wisconsin in person and says this particular state Supreme Court race will be important for the future of civilization. Why is he always saying dramatic shit like this? The future of civilization. Anyway, the person he campaigned against ended up winning. Boo-hoo. He spent tens of millions of dollars trying to flip this race and lost. Fucking stupid fuck. This was probably one of the final nails in the coffin for Trump and Elon's political alliance. April 2nd. Trump waited until after April Fool's Day to unveil new tariffs on, a lot of countries. Most countries. Most of the world. If you import anything from any of these places, you pay an import tax. He calls this Liberation Day because, I don't know, 1984, dude.
My fellow Americans, this is Liberation Day.
The minimum rate is 10% across the board, increasing the more the U.S. imports from that country. He says the goal is to reduce trade deficits, which, to be sure, is something that imposing tariffs on everybody would fix, but it's a stupid fucking goal. There's no reason to fix it. Why do you want to eliminate trade deficits? It makes no sense. He also claims these are reciprocal tariffs, which they are not. He says they do it to us, we do it to them, which is a fucking lie. These other countries are not tariffing U.S. goods. He also repeats this weird claim that the U.S. is subsidizing Canada. How are they subsidizing Canada? They're not. He just lies about everything. He just says bullshit over and over and over and hopes that people believe him, but there's no basis for any of this. April 4th. Dr. Oz, as he's known on TV, became the head of the Center for Medicare and Medicaid Services. It's an agency within the HHS, so, I mean, he promoted a bunch of straight bullshit on his TV show, and we've already seen that he has no problem just lying straight to your face to serve Trump's interests, but, I mean, it could be worse. I guess he's not as bad as RFK. April 7th. Originally, a federal court blocked Trump's use of the Alien Enemies Act, but on this day the Supreme Court came in and lifted that block, allowing for the deportations to continue. But they didn't specifically rule on whether Trump's invocation of the act was legal or illegal. They just said that there was a procedural technicality that made the ruling by the court that blocked it invalid, which is that it was filed in the wrong area. Therefore, the Supreme Court said the claim had to be filed in the Texas District Court. The decision was originally made by the Southern District of New York, and they said, no, if you want the court to help you, you have to file it with the Texas District Court. Good luck with that. Thank you, Supreme Court. April 13th. For this day, we're going to take a quick break from the Trump administration. Have you heard of the Democratic Party governor of Pennsylvania, Josh Shapiro? Somebody broke into his home and lit it on fire. The place didn't totally collapse, but it got pretty well burned. He admitted to law enforcement that he planned on attacking Shapiro with a sledgehammer if he could find him. The attacker was reportedly mentally ill and off his meds, but he was also motivated by the Israel-Palestine conflict. Okay, great, yeah. Oh, right, yeah. So Josh Shapiro is Jewish, and he attacked the place on Passover. It's just interesting how mixed in with all these other stories you have left-wingers who are pissed off about Israel, attacking not the US government, not the Republican Party, not the people who are actually in power, commanding the military, setting American foreign policy federally. Instead, he attacks a random Jewish Democrat, who I'm pretty sure as governor has nothing to do with foreign policy. He's a Jew. This guy is pissed off at Israel, and people take their feelings about Israel and just transpose that onto Jewish people in general, which is why there's so much anti-Semitism right now. But yeah, how much coverage do you remember about this story? A guy tries to murder a Jewish politician and succeeds at lighting his house on fire, and it doesn't even feel like it's a major story. Most people don't even remember this happened. April 14th. Harvard University was sent a demand letter detailing what they must do to avoid being targeted by the government. It included reporting students to the federal government whom the school deemed hostile to American values, whatever that means. They also had to eliminate any kind of DEI initiative, and they were going to be forced to let a government-approved third-party audit program and department material searching for anything they don't like. This is a pretty unusual and direct attack on educational independence, a push for government control of what universities teach. I actually feel like I'm not making this sound like as big a deal as it is. April 16. Boasberg, the judge that Trump was attacking for presiding over the alien enemies invocation case, published a 46-page-long memo claiming there is probable cause to hold Trump admin officials in contempt for violating court orders, laying out a timeline of their deliberately evasive maneuvering, as well as the contradictions and lies told by Trump officials. April 25th. The FBI arrests a Wisconsin state judge because she intentionally misdirected federal agents to help them evade ICE. So what happened is the ICE guys were waiting outside of a courtroom to arrest somebody as soon as they left, and the judge said, "Hey, how about you go out this other door instead?" directing the person to the exit where ICE wasn't waiting for them. Now, from what I understand, a judge is not supposed to do this kind of shit, but it was also a needlessly escalatory response. Arresting a judge is not normal, and it's not something that you should ever do lightly. This was a show of force. April 28th. I think this was the first time they deported U.S. citizens. They were children, 3 of them. I think their mothers weren't in the country legally, so ICE just deported the kids too. Now, is that legal? Is that how it works? Like, can you just do that? Can you deport citizens if they're children and you're deporting their parents? I don't know, I'm not a lawyer. I would have had to look this shit up. But Tom Homan, the man whom Trump gave the newly made-up position border czar, came out and said, "We don't deport U.S. citizens. Their parents made the decision. And we removed children with their mothers who requested the children depart with them. That's a parental decision." So Homan isn't even arguing that they were U.S. citizens, but that we have a right to deport U.S. citizens under these circumstances. He's making it sound like it was only okay because the parents requested it. But their lawyers claim that this is a lie, that they weren't given due process, and that the mothers didn't want the kids removed with them. And regardless of what the mothers actually wanted, this is probably just a way of pushing the envelope, testing your limits, seeing what you can get away with. Like, oh, okay, so we can't just deport citizens? Well, what about citizen children with non-citizen parents? Do you think we could get away with that? May 1st. Remember how the Supreme Court ruled that that one case had to be moved to the Texas district? Well, it was moved, and on this day, a judge from that court said, yeah, the Trump admin can't deport people using this act, and the invocation of the Alien Enemies Act was unlawful. I'm just noting this so as to say that people did go through all of the procedure they were supposed to. May 3rd. The HHS, which is the Health and Human Services Department, the thing led by RFK Jr., decides to fire most of NIOSH, the National Institute for Occupational Safety and Health. It's part of the Center of Disease Control and Prevention. It did a bunch of research, helped make policy about preventing workplace death and illness, and it's kind of just being gutted for no reason. The only way to make sense of RFK is that he secretly does just want people to die of preventable diseases. That seems to be the goal behind everything he fucking does. May 8th. The UK Prime Minister came to the US, and Trump spent all day talking about a US-UK trade deal that never fucking happened because he doesn't have the authority to make a trade deal by himself. It has to go through Congress, and nothing was actually written out and ready to go. It would have had to be negotiated, but for some reason, he got away with just acting as though he'd accomplished something. And now, months later, I've had conversations with people who think they remember the US having a trade agreement with the UK. They didn't. There was no trade deal. Nothing happened. They basically just talked about wanting a trade deal, and then that was that. Nothing was ever signed. There was no trade deal. May 11th. Trump announces that he's going to accept a luxury jet from the royal family of Qatar for some reason. The DOJ, now just operating as his personal bitch force, argues that it's going to be considered a gift to the U.S. Defense Department to be used as Trump's personal plane during his presidency. Then, after his presidency, it will be gifted to the Trump Presidential Library, which from the sounds of it means that nobody else will even get to use this thing? This is actually nothing compared with all the Trump coin shit, but it has the advantage of being easier to understand for the average person. Trump coin is more of a concept. I can't show you Trump coin. A big luxury jet is a lot more concrete. May 20th. This wasn't actually that consequential, but it was quite horrifying to hear Kristi Noem, the person who's in charge of the Department of Homeland Security, the woman who admitted in her memoirs to shooting a puppy in the face on purpose because she decided it was too difficult to train. They asked her what habeas corpus means, and she said habeas corpus is the constitutional right of the president to remove people from the country. What the fuck? Dude, imagine if somebody said, the First Amendment of the U.S. Constitution guarantees the right of the government to censor speech it doesn't like. What the How can you get this so fucked up while serving in a position like this? How is this person still in government? May 21st. The South African president, Cyril Ramaphosa, met with Trump in the White House, and Trump basically forced him to watch a bunch of weird videos that he literally played off of Twitter. It included an elected politician in South Africa, a member of some minority party that's not in government, singing at a rally about how he wanted to kill white farmers. Ramaphosa explains that it's his constitutional right to say these things, but stresses that this is not the view of the government, nor is it a reflection of South African law. This meeting wasn't that consequential, but it was pretty fucking embarrassing. May 22nd. This is when the contents of the One Big Beautiful Bill Act were locked in as it passed through the House of Representatives. The fact they named it this, by the way, is itself an act of enthusiastic submission. It's their way of bending over and showing Trump how much they're willing to do anything he fucking wants. So it's not just stupid, it's more complex than that. Search OBBB Act Summary if you want. It did a lot of things all at once. I just want to note that this is the exact kind of legislation that Republicans all used to hate. They used to hate big, sweeping bills that did a lot of things all at once instead of being more focused. And they complained about bills like this being filled with pork spending, meaning little kickbacks that are not really the main point of the bill, so the spending they want just kind of slides by with everything else in a hopefully not very noticeable or attention-grabbing way, which is probably a legitimate criticism, but this time around they're all celebrating and acting like shoving literally everything into the same one big bill is actually a good way of doing policy. June 5th, Elon Musk, after leaving government, criticized Trump. He said that Trump is in the Epstein files. Trump said he might cut subsidies for Elon's companies. Then Elon walked it back and apologized. Yeah, okay, whatever. Also June 5th, Trump announced that he is doing another full travel ban affecting Afghanistan, Myanmar, Chad, Republic of Congo, Equatorial Guinea, Eritrea, Haiti, Iran, Libya, Somalia, Sudan, Yemen. Is it really good that the president has the power to just ban whole countries like this at a whim? June 8th. Protests in Los Angeles erupt over the ICE deportations. Trump calls in the National Guard without permission or request by the California governor. I wasn't sure how it worked before this particular story, but my understanding is that National Guard units are considered part of the Army technically, but they're a reserve faction that's under dual control between the U.S. state governments and the U.S. federal government, and though the president has on paper the legal authority to deploy any given guard unilaterally, defying the governor to do so is unusual and a breach of norms. And then, because he's such a fucking moron, he was publicly taking credit and thanking the National Guard for doing such a great job at stopping the violence before they had actually been deployed. Like they were still on their way and he was celebrating. Which could do a lot to suggest that maybe their deployment wasn't even necessary. This was also when California Governor Gavin Newsom gave a public address about the whole situation. June 10th. Trump visited a U.S. military base called Fort Bragg and delivered a partisan, politically charged speech criticizing Biden, Newsom, repeating various lies and conspiracy theories, and calling for anybody who burns the American flag to be jailed. Where did that come from? This kind of politicization of the military itself is against a bunch of laws for anyone who still cares about that. June 14th. Trump has the U.S. military put on a parade about the history of the Army. This coincided with it being 250 years since the formation of the Revolutionary Continental Army in 1775, but really it was just about it being Donald Trump's birthday. Also on June 14th, a coalition of many different progressive organizations put together a mass demonstration in protest of the Trump administration and its policies. They called this the No Kings Protest, or No Kings Day, partly in reaction to the oddly monarchist language and imagery used by the Trump administration. This day of protest was enormous, and it happened all across the country. It might be the largest protest in U.S. history, depending on how you measure that. Then meanwhile, in Minnesota, there was a guy driving around trying to assassinate Democrats. He shot the Minnesota State Senator John Hoffman and his wife. They ended up surviving, but they were hospitalized. Then the shooter drove to another city and shot Melissa Hortman, an elected member of the Minnesota House of Representatives, and her husband at their home. This time the shooting was successful. He murdered both of them. The shooter was disguised as a police officer and had a list of people whom he was going to target throughout the day until stopped. We just got very lucky that he was caught so early on. It seems like his goal was to sow chaos and distrust of police on this day of planned protest, hoping to contribute to the violence across the country, while targeting Democratic Party members and, oh, what a surprise, abortion rights advocates and abortion providers. Notice how this story is completely fucking insane, and you probably haven't heard about it that much. Yeah. June 16th. Trump's family started selling phones? What the fuck? June 21st. The US decided to bomb nuclear sites in Iran. This was a frightening morning for many people, though in the end, I guess fortunately not much ended up happening, really. July 2nd. The Trump administration, by freezing all federal funding to the University of Pennsylvania, was able to pressure that school into stripping a transgender athlete named Leah Thomas of the titles that she won in competitive swimming, revoking all of them, banning all trans women from participating in female sports going forward, and then even going so far as to issue a public apology to cis women for allowing a trans person to compete. I remember the Leah Thomas story from a few years ago. She was already a male competitive swimmer, then came out as trans, and only a year later she was in the women's competition. That doesn't sound fair to a lot of people. And if the university had just decided on its own to say, our policies back then were not well calibrated, and we think there needs to be more of a restriction or delay before you can compete, or hell, even if they did say, you know what, for the time being we're just blocking all trans athletes. Like, that's not actually that crazy of a policy for them to have for the time being. The public apology seems weirdly fucking overkill, but really the bad part about this story is, why is the president getting involved in something like this and threatening to withhold funding from the whole school over this issue? So obviously there are more things that happened in July and August so far, but this video is only from Inauguration Day to July 4th, so I'm gonna stop here. I feel like right now, people don't understand just how bad things are. Or they might say things are bad, but their language and behavior doesn't reflect the true gravity of just how bad shit is. They're reacting as though things are just a little bit bad. I'm having trouble conveying to people that this is the worst it's ever been. This is an unprecedented, completely fucking crazy level of open corruption and criminality. This is nothing like any past US president. It's nothing like any other first world government. It's nothing like the shit that people criticized Obama or Bush or any other previous president for. I think people want to say, like, oh yeah, Trump is doing some illegal stuff, but all politicians do some illegal things, don't they? Or, yeah, Trump may have lied about some things, but all politicians tell some lies, right? That mentality is fucking bullshit and not applicable here. This is like if I was talking about Jeffrey Dahmer and somebody was like, well, we're all criminals in a way because we all drive over the speed limit sometimes. Other politicians are not like Trump. Other governments are not like the Trump administration. And Trump himself brings down everyone around him. He corrupts people. He purges the people who have actual principles and replaces them with idiots and suck-ups. Richard Nixon's crimes are nothing compared with Trump's. Trump could emulate every single thing that Nixon ever did wrong and it would just be Tuesday. He would be on to the next most terrible thing by the time you figured out what even happened. But there's something fucked up happening where it kind of feels like everybody has a scale, but it's a tiny scale, like what they might have in a supermarket to weigh walnuts or something, so it only goes up to 4 pounds. Then I walk in and I throw a fucking anvil on it, and you go, oh, that's heavy. But you don't get it. You only see the 4 pounds. You don't understand how heavy this thing is. You just go, oh wow, it's really heavy. 4 pounds. 4 pounds, that's pretty heavy. We've been accustomed to only dealing with politicians within a certain range of goodness or badness. They tell a certain amount of lies, or they do a certain amount of crime, and you try to be critical of it, but it's tricky because the other guy probably also does bad stuff. Nobody's perfect. But then Donald Trump comes in and he completely blows everybody else away, and you're not prepared to understand it. Your scale just doesn't go that high. Talking to normal people right now can make you feel kinda crazy if you're actually paying attention to how bad things have become. I would say the most important stories that have happened so far are the Alien Enemies Act invocation, resulting in people being taken without due process and sentenced to die in a foreign prison. The Eric Adams dismissal. It's not world-changing, but this is like the most blatantly corrupt quid pro quo bullshit in American history. This alone is way worse than anything Nixon did. The Harvard letter, his attacks against law firms, his attacks against the media. Trump is clearly trying to exert control over what kind of ideas, values, and speech is acceptable in public discourse, in a way and to an extent unlike any president before him. Everything involving Trump Coin and World Liberty Financial, Trump is brazenly engaging in the most personally enriching corruption scheme of any U.S. president ever by using his office to promote a crypto coin that allows anybody in the world to effectively bribe him anonymously and there's nothing we can do about it. And yeah, Jesus Christ, the tariffs, the trade war. Like everything else, the way that Trump is implementing tariff policy is dishonest and unlawful. Just think about how ridiculous it is that the entire world economy has to be upended and reformed at Trump's personal whim with no involvement of any other person. He can just personally declare all of this stuff. It's all part of his mafia boss approach to politics. Suddenly, the only way for your huge business to not get screwed over is to appease Trump until he decides to give you an exemption. I don't really know what to do about any of this. It really feels like the America we knew is just dying in front of us. I don't have a positive note to end on. Sorry about that.